Hi, everybody. This is Kathy L. Murphy, the Pulpwood Queen, in my National Book Festival ball cap that my friend brought me. I'm here at the University of Texas in Tyler, where I'm now doing my Tuesday night book club meetings because for some reason they have excellent internet here on campus. And at my house, it just drops. It's just terrible. All these storms have messed everything up. But we're here tonight with one of our authors that's been with us before. And the last time I was talking to him I think it was a pre-conversation, or I was talking to you about your books, and you told me about this book that The White Boy, and I had not um, read it. And when you told me the premise, I could hardly wait to read it. So you all are in for a treat. We're going to talk to Trace first, then I'm going to open it up so that we can all learn his process and everything and what he's doing. And he's doing it with a family. And you're in Cincinnati, and
Right.
it's beautiful there. Thank you very much. It was 55 this morning.
It was, and it topped out at like 81, 82 degrees. Now that could all change tomorrow. It could be, triple digits. I don't know.
Well, I've heard that Cincinnati is one of the best places to live in the country.
I, you
And,
know,
I have a friend that lives up there,
yeah,
and she said they have a fabulous art community because
they
she's an
do.
artist. And who knew? Now, is Cincinnati where the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is too?
No, that's in Cleveland.
Oh,
We've
that's in
got
Cleveland.
the
Okay.
National Underground Railroad Museum and
Well,
a few others. So
well,
yeah,
that's
it's
pretty amazing.
pretty
I'm gonna
vibrant.
get up there. I'm gonna get up there. I really want to go visit my friend Pam, and I've never been to Cincinnati, and your weather sounds so inviting. It's actually just in the 90s now, so we feel like we've had a nice Arctic blast because it's been in the triple digits. It got up to 111 one day this summer, and I know even up in Kansas, where I'm from, it got even higher than that. So, weather's talked about. We're here with Trace. He's writing. He's got another book that's going to be coming up, and so let's talk a little bit about, for all those in the Pulpwood Queen channel viewer land that do not know you, like 77% of my viewership is coming from India and the
Oh,
UK. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So I want you to kind of tell a little bit about your background. How'd you get into writing? A bit about your family and where this writing bug came from. I'll let you talk.
so, I mean, as far back as I can remember, I always loved to write. I mean, I can remember, back in high school, I think that was the first time I actually had, creative writing curriculum in my English classes. And it was by far, my favorite part of school. And I went to Ohio University and graduated in the 90s. And I graduated with a degree in creative writing, thinking, hey, the day after I graduate, I'm going to go become a novelist. And then life kind of punched me in the face when I graduated, and I wasn't sure really what I was doing. But I ended up in public relations, and I ended up as an advertising copywriter. So I've actually been writing, as a full-time job for years. I was a copywriter for 15 years. And then one day I woke up and I realized I'm not doing what it is that I want to do. So I talked to my wife and pitched her this idea that I was going to, start freelancing because we weren't in a situation financially where I could just quit my job and start writing. And I had tried, getting up early and writing and going to work. I had tried going to work, coming home at night and writing. And because I was writing, as a job, I was just tapped out, when I would get
Right.
home. And I had no energy to work on my own stuff. And I remember at one point I even talked to my the owner of our ad agency, and pitched the idea of, hey, can I work 4 days a week? I'm, work Monday through Thursday, 10-hour days, and then I would write all day Friday, and that didn't work either because I was so exhausted from having worked, 40 hours. So like I tried all these different approaches and nothing was working. And so I finally came up with the idea, if I'm going to make this work, I have to cut down the amount of time that I'm working, but I can't lose my income, you know,
Right.
and, because we have a house, cars, kids at the time. And So I decided, well, I'm going to try and make it go as a freelance writer. So I was a freelance writer for 12 years, and it was fantastic because I worked maybe 20 hours a week. And then, was able to write fiction, and I also do some voiceover work. So I was able to do that as well, in the downtime. So to me, that was, the perfect balance, and it allowed me to still, write for a living, keep benefits, earn a good income, and then also gave me the freedom to start writing novels. And my first novel came out in 2015, and I think I've published a book a year since then. I have 8 books out. It's interesting because most of my books are crime thrillers. Actually, all of them, but The White Boy, are crime thrillers. Um,
Right.
but I love to write. Actually, I haven't written a lot of short stories recently because I've been so focused on novels. But early on in my career, I wrote short stories primarily, and they were all horror because I loved horror short stories. And that's kind of where The White Boy came from, because it started out as a short story. I was waiting on edits back from an editor, and I needed something to do. And my son and I had this really strange experience at our house. And
Yeah.
I got to
Tell
write about
everybody
that.
about that.
Yeah, so kind of the origin of the story, and I touched on this in the Facebook post today. So I would encourage anyone watching to check that out. My son, he's 12, but at the time he was about 3, and it was really early in the morning, and he came into my room and woke me up, and he said, Daddy, there's a boy in my room. Now I have a daughter and I have my son. I said there should be no boy in his room. So I sprang out of bed and run up the steps, because our bedroom is on the lower level, and the kids are on the upper level. And it's like 3:30 in the morning, and I go in his room, and there's nothing there. Nothing that I saw. He had a glider, rocking chair left over from when it was still a nursery, and next to the next to the rocking chair was he had like a 3-foot tall Darth Vader figure, like a really large action figure, and then next to that he had a nightlight. And he was telling me how he saw this thing behind his rocking chair. He woke up and it was staring at him. And I'm a practical person, and so
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what's the what really happened. And I said, I think what happened is I think your nightlight cast a shadow of Darth Vader against your wall, and that's probably what you saw. And he said, no. He said, shadows are black. And I said, well, what
Oh,
color was
man.
this thing that you saw? And he said, it was white. And then this is what freaked me out. And this made it into the book. Actually, I think it's on the back of the book.
Hmm.
And he said, I said, well, what did it look like? And he said, it looked like me, but it didn't have a face. And
Mm.
it just sent shivers down my spine. And
I got shivers right now just having hearing
yeah,
you tell it again.
so the very first chapter of the book is, I mean, it's a short read. I've had people tell me they've read it in 2 hours. I wish I could have written it in 2 hours. But I mean, the whole thing takes place over a 7-day period, like Sunday to Sunday. And the very first chapter is almost exactly what my son and I experienced that night. And that was the beginning of the short story. I wasn't sure how to deal with, what he was dealing with. And he was afraid to go back into his room, and that wasn't anything we've had to deal with before. And so I just started, writing to get this story down, and it just kind of snowballed. And so the very first chapter of the book is exactly what happened, that night, and everything else is completely fictional. I'm happy to say that The White Boy has never come back. We've had a few other strange experiences, which I actually plan on covering in some of my other blog posts in the house. But just given that we're headed into the Halloween season. But so yeah, so it was, the first chapter is exactly what we experienced that day.
Now, how old is your house?
We built it. So it
Oh,
really it
wow.
sits on an old farm. Actually, we're in a neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood sits on, I think, what used to be 3 different farms. I don't really know the history of the area at all, but I mean, we built it, and uh, we've had 2, other than what my son experienced. I had a even scarier experience with my daughter that I'll share on the blog. I won't spoil it here, but that one, I don't know if I'm going to write about that. Maybe, I don't know, but that one unnerved me even more than what my son and I experienced. So yeah, it was interesting. But I've had those experiences since going back to college. So I don't know if it's something that is indicative of the house, or if maybe something that I've just kind of bumped into from time to time. But I've got a few interesting stories that I'll share throughout the course of the week.
Oh boy, everybody's going to have to get on there. I know I'll be the first one because when you were telling me the story the first time, I actually lived, I may have told you, but I lived in a house that had really bizarre things happening. And then it got violently bizarre, chairs thrown across the room. And I called the police, and the guy told me, "You need to get out of here." I mean, the police officer, he goes, "This is too weird what's happening to you." So, I often think about that house. It was the cutest house too, but I think sometimes we don't realize it but there's a lot of people that have been in our spaces before, you
Yeah,
know. So you
yeah.
don't know what may have been there. I mean, remember Poltergeist, what they found
Oh
out
yeah.
that that house was built on old Indian burial grounds or something. So you just don't know. So and you hear a lot with people that live near Civil war sites and everything. So, but it's, you guys, this is the perfect book to get us into October. It's it's busy time for people, but you won't be able to put it down. And I'm very excited. I'm excited about hearing about you writing about some more stories too. But what are you working on now?
So I am writing a psychological thriller. I probably have about 5 hours left on it. It's almost finished.
Ooh,
I was in Nashville a few weeks ago at Killer Nashville, which is a
oh,
fantastic
yeah,
writing conference.
yeah.
If anyone's interested in, met with a few agents there and, pitched the book, let them know that it wasn't finished yet, but I had, a lot of positive reactions to it. I had several agents that were asking for, to read the manuscript when it was finished. So by Friday, it'll be completely done and in the bag, and I'll be sending it out. But I have no idea, when that'll actually see the light of day. But it's when I was on your in the book club last year, you had featured Five Will Die, and it's
Yeah.
similar themes. This one is about a detective. It takes place in Long Island that is just returned from a 3 month basically medical leave because she had a psychological breakdown. And it's the story of her kind of going back to work and dealing with some of the fallout from past trauma, while at the same time trying to solve the murder of a prominent author who was murdered while having an affair at his beach house on Long Island. So, she's got the stressors of dealing with that case, and, it's the type of thing where everyone's a suspect. And it was a lot of fun to write. Now, I'm really excited about it. I had the idea probably 3 years ago, but I had other projects that I was scheduled to complete first. And it was really hard to start these other projects knowing that this one was kind of on the shelf. So I was really excited to finally get to work on it. And, I'm excited to get that across the finish line.
Trace,
Now,
where do you
yeah,
live?
go ahead.
Where do you
I'm
live?
in Cincinnati. I grew up in Cincinnati and I moved away. I lived in Columbus for a while. I lived in New York City for quite a while, back to Columbus. And then now I actually live in a very small town about 30 miles north of Cincinnati, but no one's ever heard of it. So I just tell them Cincinnati.
Well, I kind of know the area because I grew up in Pittsburgh. But I was going to say, where was this house? Are you
It's
in
the
it
one
now?
Oh, I'm still in
yeah.
it. Yeah,
Okay.
still in it.
Do you know about Sanborn Maps?
No.
So you go online, Sanborn, they did a lot of surveying and going through every single county town in the country. You should, if you, Sanborn is Sanborn, and you can find the plots. So you might be able to find out some of the stuff there too. You can also go, I'm a historian, so I get into this, but you can also go to the land grant office, which is public domain. If you know your coordinates of where your house is, you can go all the way back and find all the original homestead plats.
Oh,
So
that's great.
if you're really curious,
That would be really interesting.
it makes another mystery, but I know what you're talking about. A long time ago, I was a camp counselor, I can't remember the name of it, but it was just north of Newtown in New York off the Hudson River. And the camp was really beautiful camp, huge acreage. But there was this old road we go out, and at the end of it, I had older kids, I had fifth graders, and we lived in an Indian teepee. But if we go to this little store, the kids were allowed to spend money on candy. So I took my little fifth graders out there, and this road used to have a town or a village. You could see the foundation. You could see that, how it is in New York and all that part back east. You see the original post where everything was. So we were in there, and it was a little bit down to dusk. And we were looking at a foundation there. And it wasn't the first time we'd gone through there, but all of a sudden I started feeling weird. I mean, I felt really weird, like I was being watched. And the thing that really started spooking me out is that my girls started feeling the same way. And so we got out of there, and I never went back. There's just something about it, that tilt of the light. It's, I think that was probably July, but the tilt of the light through the trees, back east in New York, it's all forest, it's gorgeous, just weird because the foundations were there and you could see stuff. It was all from the 1870s.
Well, definitely check out those resources. Yeah,
that'd be fun.
I always, growing up as a kid, I really didn't believe in a lot of that stuff. I mean, it was fun to watch. I loved horror movies as a kid, loved it, loved the paranormal stuff. And but once you start having one or two or three, things that happen to you that you can't logically explain. I mean, I always tell, I tell people it's like trying to teach a goldfish algebra. You can't explain it. You just can't. Like until you experience it, and you're like, I mean, I'm sure I can tell some of my stories. People might think I'm nuts, but I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I was there. I know what I saw, or I know what I heard, and what can you do?
So you sound very disciplined to know that you have 5 hours to go. With me, it's like I have no idea. Do you outline? How do you actually do it?
I do. It's funny because with each book that I've written, my outlines have gotten more detailed. I think actually in the first book, I probably just had bullet points that I had written down, kind of like the story beats that I knew that I wanted to hit. But I really struggled with getting the first book done. I think it took me about a year to write the first draft of my first book because I didn't really have any waypoints to follow. So for me, and I know authors, are super passionate about whether they outline or whether they don't or whatever. But for me, I've just found that I've tried it multiple ways. And for me, outlining it makes the process so much easier. Now, I'll definitely admit that, the story definitely changes. I've always said that, even when I have an outline and then I start writing that, the story is probably still only 70% there. And I've written novels before where I thought I knew who the killer was, or the killer was a certain person in the outline. That actually happened with Five Will Die a few books ago. It was a small town murder mystery. And in the outline, I knew exactly who the killer was. But when I actually started writing it and got to that point, something else took over, and the killer was someone else. And I had a novel 2 novels ago called Catch and Release, where I had these 2 characters that were dead, and my protagonist was tasked with finding the killer who killed him. And I had a very detailed outline. That one was interesting because I had written myself into a corner because I didn't really know exactly. I thought I had created this perfect crime. I didn't know how to solve it. So I talked to some people from the FBI, helped me out and gave me some pointers how they would, investigate it. And that actually helped a lot. But it turned out, I was sharing with one of my beta readers, and he reviews everything that I write almost, as I write it. And he's like, I get the impression these 2 characters are still alive and they're not dead. I'm like, well, wait a minute. So then I started thinking, and I'm like, well, you know what, man, it'd be a hell of a lot better story if they were alive, wouldn't it? So of course, in the outline, they weren't. So, I changed it up, and not to spoil anything, but they turn out, they are alive. So, I'm a big believer in outlines, but I also believe that outlines are organic and it's okay if they change. Nothing is set in stone. But for me, it's just so much easier to have a plan when I sit down and write something. And then as far as, being disciplined and only having 5 hours left, I tend to procrastinate. So I probably really only have an hour left, but it's going to take me 5 hours to get that hour work done.
That's really nice to hear.
Yeah. I do feel like with every project, I get a little more disciplined and grow up a little bit, but I am so easily distracted. And I'm the type of person that'll, go online to look up a simple thing. And then 3 hours have gone by and I'm on some YouTube channel watching something about baseball cards. They completely, devoid of what I was looking for. So yeah, so I really have to, really steer myself back on course when I start falling off. But
I hear that all the time about how authors. Fanny Flagg one time said she looked out the window and a squirrel ran by, and that was it. I was done for the day. I was like,
yeah,
what's that squirrel doing? So now she goes, I work in a closet with no windows.
there
I
was
thought,
there was a point where I used to use a program that you would, I think actually now I forget the name of it. You would put in like 3 hours and it would shut everything off. I mean, you could still use your computer, but you couldn't get online. It would turn off basically your internet to that device, and you'd think, well, Trace, just stop going online, but sometimes like you hear the ding of your email and you just go, or you get a text and you go and it pulls you out of that zone. And this program was great because it turned everything off. And you couldn't even in like an emergency, if you're like, oh my God, I need to get on and you send an email, you couldn't do it. Like there was no way to override it. Like you were stuck for those 3 hours with no internet. And it really made you focus on, what you were working on, which was great. Until you needed to research something and then you were, kind of screwed because you couldn't get online. But
well, you just have to schedule that on your outline when you do the research and stuff. But it's true. Most
yeah,
authors do go down these rabbit holes, and especially I know Janet because she does a lot of research.
I'm a rabbit
I
hole.
know, yeah,
it's easy to do.
it's really hard, and so does Jeffrey when you wrote your book. And but we all learn from everybody sharing their process. And so, what does your family think about these books?
So my daughter, who's now 15, is to the age where she can actually read them. My first book was probably a little more violent than it should be because I was still kind of learning my way. And, I mistakenly thought that if I want to, show that I have an evil character in my book, that person has to do evil things. And the more evil the things that he does, or the more violent, that's indicative of how violent he is. I've learned since then that's not the case. But so I think I probably went a little overboard on the first book that I wrote. But she's at the age now where she can read I think she's read most of what I've written. My son, who's 12, has read The White Boy. He was, because it was kind of based on his experience, he was really interested in it. And I think it's a very light, I even hesitate to call it a horror novel because I don't think I think it's more suspense. But yeah, I mean, they've always been super supportive. My wife is fantastic. I remember, back in 2014 when we sat down, we were out, to dinner. And I said, pitched her the idea that I wanted to freelance, and she was the most supportive person that, I could possibly ask for. And I think that's a huge thing because, authors, we all get in our head, we all make mistakes. We all kind of waste our time sometimes, and it can be tough. And it's good to have someone there that, unconditionally supports me and is, even when I don't think I can do something, she's like, yeah, you can. You've done this before. You can do it again. And so it's always great to have that support system. And it's funny, though, because I always tell a story when my daughter, actually, my kids have never seen me go to an office. I left the ad agency right as when my daughter was just born. And she had, she was probably in the third or fourth grade. And it was like a career day type thing. And someone asked her what she wanted to be when she grew up. And she's like, oh, she's like, I want to be a writer like my dad. They said, why? And she said, well, because he just stays home and doesn't do anything. Because they never actually saw, the work, right? And I always kind of laugh about that. But yeah, my whole family's been extremely supportive. My extended family as well. My mother still comes to, literary events where I'm speaking or doing panels or roundtables. I have one on Thursday this week at a local library, and I'm sure I don't even tell her anymore. I'm sure she'll pop up because she just seems to know when those things are happening. But
she's just stalking you.
yeah, she's my
Does
number
she have
one
a scrapbook where she
fan.
keeps all your newspaper clippings and everything?
I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if someday she showed up. One day or 1 year for Christmas, probably 10 years ago, she gave me a box that had every one of my report cards from like kindergarten through college. Kept them.
Are you an only child? Are you?
No, I have an older brother. I don't always admit it that I'm related to him, but yeah, I do. But yeah, and it was hysterical to go back and read the comments from like my second grade teacher that were on there. It was absolutely hysterical. But so it wouldn't surprise me at all if she's keeping some memorabilia like that.
Were you a kid that wouldn't sit still, or what did they write? I mean, I'm curious.
Oh, I think the overarching theme, which is probably still true today, were those dreaded words. What is it? Does not meet his full potential, or something like that. I think, I think they saw like, well, he's smarter. He's probably smarter than he's actually performing on tests and such. But yeah, so I don't know. I think I'm probably still struggling with that a little bit, but.
Well, those report cards are always interesting. That's pretty cool that she kept them. Well,
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think I read them for like hours after that, and I was in tears laughing so hard on some of the, comments that were in there.
Well, you might be able to do a switch in genres and write something. There was an author that was a professional photographer, and she went back to Louisiana looking for some old photographs. And when she went in the attic, she found all of her diaries from the age she was 13 to 18.
Wow.
And she sat down and started reading them, and she was laughing so hard she was crying. She didn't remember writing half the stuff, but she put all the best ones, from 13 to 18 in this book, and it was called Miss American Pie. And it's still one of the funniest books I have ever read in my life. And I don't think she ever wrote another book. She's a photographer. But I read that book aloud to my daughter's friends who they were all in theater. And I said, oh, well, I'm doing, Lainey's hair. You guys start reading it. They stayed in my shop until we finished that book. That's how much they loved it. And I told her, that's just unreal. And I go, sometimes it's things like the story that happened to you and your son, and the report cards can be the seed for something, think about
That's
that.
usually how it works. I mean, with every book I've written, it just starts with this small kernel, with Five Will Die a few books ago that you featured last year. It was, what if a serial killer had tipped off the police that he was coming, versus instead of,
hiding,
committing the murders and then taunting the police afterwards. What if he taunted them before he even committed the murders? So like little things like that, and that's all it was. And then from that just kind of kept growing and growing, and you just kind of, it's like a snowman, right? You just kind of keep adding some skin to the bones until you've got something to work with.
It's amazing. Have you got a title for your next book yet? I forgot.
So I do. The title, I don't like it. The title is called Fatal Flaw, which I'm not in love with. I'm hoping something better comes along, but that's been the working title since I started it. And as of yet, nothing else has popped up. So I don't know if it'll actually, go to press with that title or not. I hope it doesn't. I feel like there's something better out there. I just, I don't know. It hasn't hit me yet.
Maybe one of your beta readers will have a remark for you.
Maybe. Yeah.
They come up sometimes with some great titles. So
yeah,
you just never know.
How do you get your titles?
It's funny. Sometimes I know them before I start the novel, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes they come at the very end. My novel Catch and Release, which is the first novel of the Connor Harding series, was originally called The Postcard Murders, because the premise of the book is that there's my protagonist is hired by a retired hitman to solve the murder of his wife and daughter from a decade earlier, and all he has to go on are these postcards that the killer sends him every year on the anniversary of the murder, haunting him about this is what your wife said before she died, and this is what your daughter was wearing, and all these horrible details, kind of just to kind of continue to twist the knife in him. And so Connor Harding, my protagonist, has to solve the murder just with these postcards. And as he's going through, he's got the shoebox of cards. He's going through, he realizes that all the postcards are sent from different cities. They've got different postmarks on them, because he's thinking, well, if they're all sent from New York, then I'll just go start in New York. But there's not two that are from the same city. So it's kind of this wild goose chase. But so originally that was called the Postcard Murders. And then I ended up calling it Catch and Release, because that is a little more tied in with the theme of the book. I didn't want to spoil it for anyone, but sometimes I've got the titles right away, and other times it's kind of like, I'm typing the end, and I'm still struggling to get it. But for some reason, they always come up, and they're always titles that I like. So that's why I feel confident that at some point something's going to bubble up to the surface and replace Fatal Flaw. I don't know.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, and it's got. Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say the reason I went with that is because the character who's murdered in chapter 2 is this really well-known author, and characters have a fatal flaw, and he has a fatal flaw that is what kind of brings him down. So that's kind of why that's there. I wanted a title that was kind of a play on words, a literary term, but the more I think about it, I'm like, I don't know. It's just, it doesn't jive for me, but who knows? I mean, maybe it'll work, and it'll actually still be attached to it when it gets published, and maybe something better will come up. I don't know. I'll probably obsess over it for a lot longer than I should.
I think authors do that, but your books are exactly almost the theme of Netflix and Amazon these days is these psychological thrillers. And I mean, I just watched one the other. Have you seen White Tiger? Oh my gosh.
No.
I'm thinking brilliant writers. It was Indian film, but brilliant storyline. But we just need to get you in front of those people that are buying up all those films for Netflix, because the White Boy would be perfect. I mean, they've got American Horror Stories. They've got all these stories right now. There's a strange one right now about, I thought it was a teen movie for kids, something about a bunch of pirate boys or something.
Oh, yeah, the One Piece.
It's not a kid's movie. Have you seen it?
It's fantastic. Yeah, it's based on
but it's not a kid's movie, though.
Yeah, it's a series. We watched it with my son. It was pretty good.
Did he? Well, he's how old? He's 15?
He's 12.
Oh, the 12. Well, I can see how they like it, but it's pretty violent.
Yeah,
I was like, let's watch this. My grandson, who's 4, will love it. No. Not gonna
my son was big into pirates, because we watched Pirates of the Caribbean with him, with those, and so he had mentioned it, and it was good. I mean, I really liked it. It was one of the few things that we sat down and watched together as a family, because we usually all have our
One Piece. What's it called? One Piece.
Called One Piece. Yeah, I think it's probably
One Piece. I'm up on episode 104 now in the cartoon. My middle son got me going, but I thought the live action was fabulous.
See, and I had never seen the cartoon, but I loved the live action, and I know the cartoon is really popular. It's been going on forever, apparently.
Oh yeah, I think they have 500 episodes, but we're on 101, I think, right now. So,
oh my god,
I thought it was
no idea.
But it's funny you mentioned like Hollywood and streaming, though, because Five Will Die is currently, it hasn't officially been optioned yet, but it's in like conversations, I guess. I've met with the director a few times, and they're talking to investors. So
you should talk to Michael Ferris Smith, because he just sold, he wrote Desperation Road, and he's one of our authors. His film is coming out, and it's got some incredible people in it. I'm trying to think who's in it. I think Mel Gibson and
Oh, wow.
yeah, and he was kind of like you. I'm doing this writing thing. I don't know where it's going, and the next thing I know, he's got a movie deal. So,
ARO.
and it went fast. I mean, his went. Most people get option like me and Jamie Ford, and it's like, is it ever going to happen?
Right.
We just kind of, I kind of gave up on it between COVID and writer strike. But they say it's almost over, so we'll see.
How did,
But,
can I ask,
but
could I
hope
ask how that,
somebody watches this.
could I ask how that
What-
came about?
Yeah.
What
So the
came about?
director for me, or
Oh,
yeah. So
go ahead.
I had met this director years ago at a literary conference. It was actually a literary and a film conference in Louisville. And we had just, stayed in touch over the years. And I kind of followed her career, and she was, following up on what I was doing. And I had written a short story years ago called The Speculator Line, which was kind of a weird Western. And she was interested in turning that into a short film. And it turned out that when they started getting into the budget, there was this, basically, to make a long story short, there was a scene at the very end of the book that would have required a ton of special effects to pull off, and they basically couldn't afford to do it. So that one kind of died on the vine. But she had read my other books as they'd come out, and she had contacted me to acquire the rights to the novel Five Will Die, and then also another short story that I wrote called now I'm completely blanking on which one it was. Guys, a short story I probably wrote about 10 years ago. But it was a horror story. And so she had reached out to her investors, and they're in the process of creating a budget and trying to understand what it is that's going to take financially to bring this to life. And then they'll buy the rights based on the budget of what the project would be. So it just kind of, honestly, it just kind of happened. It was completely, wasn't anything that I was actively looking for. So I was really, surprised when she reached out to me. But
do you think most things happen because you go to these conferences? I mean, don't you think networking happens when you go to book events
I
and
think
conferences?
networking is huge.
Yeah, me too. I believe in it.
And I think too, and you and I were kind of talking about this, I think before we went live, but I think authors are an incredibly supportive bunch, where we don't necessarily consider one another as competition. There's not like trade secrets we're trying to keep from one another. And I've had people that are offered to introduce me to their agents or whatever, or that have put me in touch with certain people that have helped me out, or have recommended conferences that I've gone to. That's how I ended up at Killer Nashville. Several people have reached out and they're like, Trace, you got to go to this. We run into each other in all these other events, and it's like, you got to go to Nashville. And so yeah, I think a lot can happen if you're open to it, and if you're an authentic person. I'm a big believer in authenticity. I think if you're not the best person, then you're probably not going to reap the karma that you could be. So I've done everything I can to help other people. I review. I'm in a writers group. We review each other's works and try and steer them towards agents or editors or whatever. And I'm always really open with sharing that type of information, and they are too. So I think it's an incredibly supportive bunch.
Yeah, let's open it up to everybody. If you have a comment or a question, now's the time to ask it. So speak up.
I'm wondering about your characters. How do you build them?
So I always have an idea. I always have an idea of who I want to write about. And for example, I'm going to start after this novel. I'm starting a new series, and it was a spinoff. Or it was a character that appeared in my novel Five Will Die. But she is a freelance, an ex-profiler with the FBI who left under really bad circumstances. who now is a freelancer, and she's a freelance criminal profiler. So she kind of goes across the country and she helps people out. And I was really drawn to that character, one, because she was a female character, which I haven't really written a lot about. I mean, I've had female characters before, but the book I'm writing now is the first novel. The book I'm writing now, Fatal Flaw, is the first novel that had a female protagonist. And that's my 9th novel. So it took me 9 books to get confident enough to try and write a female protagonist. And then the next series will be, based on a female protagonist as well. So when I kind of go into it, I think of what I think is an interesting character, and then I kind of build things around that. For me, the character comes first, and then the plot will typically come second. I like quirky characters. My first series, the Mr. Finn series, was about a private investigator who's lost his license. So he can't really take the bread and butter work that most PIs do. So he ends up working for criminals who don't care if he's licensed or not. And because of that, he runs into some really bad, but some really interesting people. I've got character, one of his good friends is a character who helps people disappear. He forges the documents to give you a new identity when you have to disappear. He's basically, I forget how I described him, but basically a witness protection program if you don't want to work for the government. He does the thing that WITSEC does, but you don't have to testify against anyone. He'll just help you disappear. So I've been, for me, it's really fun to kind of create this universe of these just really interesting people that probably have a much more interesting life than I do. And then once I have these characters, then I can kind of go and I build the plot around, what's a plot that can reveal, that I can put these characters in that will kind of reveal the best part of their story. So that's probably not the best way to answer the question, but for me, it's about, why is this person interesting, or how can I make this person interesting? How is he maybe different from other people, other protagonists that are out there? For example, I have my Connor Harding series, which the protagonist in the Connor Harding series is the brother of the protagonist in the Mr. Finn series, and he's an ex-military guy who then joined the mob, and he left the mob. He negotiated an exit, so he was able to leave peacefully. And, he kind of goes around the country helping people that can't go to the police. So, I mean, I grew up as a kid. I remember watching The Equalizer, and I was, we're not talking the movies, we're talking the old
Yeah, I know what you
series.
mean.
And I was always enamored with, the idea of people who can't go to the police. If you're in danger, I know if I'm in danger, if I have a problem, I can go to the police, and state my case. But I've always been fascinated by, well, what if you can't? What if for whatever reason, what if you're a wanted fugitive and you can't go to the police? What do you do? And so I always thought it was interesting to have this network of people that those type of people can tap into. And, I think it lends to some really interesting characters and stories.
Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up on that? You mentioned earlier that you got some help from, I think, some FBI guys about.
Yeah.
How do you get that?
So I emailed the FBI's public affairs division, and it took forever. I mean, it was like 3 weeks, I think. And at this point I was like, yeah, I'll probably never hear back from them. And I got an email from somebody and like, yeah, we're going to put you in touch with so-and-so. And I thought, well, great. So, and he emailed me and gave me his cell phone number. He's like, just call me whenever you want. So I did. I called him, and we probably talked for, God, it was probably an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours.
Really?
He is probably the most fascinating person I've ever met. He was now retired. He's a retired agent. But he worked on the Unabomber case. He worked on the New York anthrax case after 9/11, which I was in New York at that time. And I remember, actually there was, we had a scare at our PR firm that someone had mailed anthrax to our building, and we were on lockdown, and it was crazy. But, and these guys are fantastic because they won't stop talking, and they will share the best stories. and it's like I couldn't write fast enough to capture all the stuff he was telling me. And he was telling me about all these bombing cases that he was working on and all this. And so it was great. I mean, he was a fantastic resource and someone that I may reach out to again. But I've also found, going to conferences, I found that, there's a few different types of conferences. You've got the craft conferences where you go and, you might learn, all right, here's how to plot, or here's how to, develop characters or whatever. And then oftentimes in some conferences, you kind of get that subject matter expert component. And I went to one, I think it's now defunct. It was in Columbus, Ohio. It was fantastic. It was all crime related. They had a bounty hunter there. They had a woman who was a prison warden. They had private detectives. They had sheriff's people. They had ATF agents, and they would just kind of tell you, this is a day in the life of an ATF agent, and it was absolutely fantastic. And they'd all give you their cards, and they were totally open, for you to contact them. One of the most fascinating people I've ever met was an arson investigator. He was one of the top 5 guys in the country that the FBI would come to if they couldn't figure out what was going on. And he was a consultant on the movie Backdraft, because the guy who was involved, it's actually based on a true story. The fire investigator who was creating all the arson or committing all the arsons was one of this guy's best friends. And they were all these top tier arson investigators. And the FBI actually called him one day and they said, we think it's one of you guys that's doing this, and we need your help to figure out who it was. And he helped them set up a sting operation to catch the guy. And those people they're invaluable, and they're so fun to talk to, and they'll tell you whatever you want to know. But as far as the FBI, it was simply just reaching out to them and saying, hey, and I've definitely reached out to people, and they've told me to, no, thanks. I don't want to talk to you. And I've had other people that'll say, well, I'll talk to you, but I don't want you to name anything, or, you can't use all this information or whatever. But yeah, it's, I think a lot of authors might be intimidated to reach out to those people, but they're eager to share their stories too. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually called the CIA one time because somebody told me they were a CIA agent, and I wanted to know if they really were. And I left a message. They called me back.
Yeah.
They called me back, and they wanted to know everything about this person. I gave them all the information, and I said, well, are you going to tell me? And they said, well, first of all, if you work for the CIA, you'll never tell anybody that you work for the CIA. So that should be a pretty good sign. Second of all, he said, describe the ID he showed me, and it was a woman. And she said, your gut feelings, stick with it. And this is a true story. 2 weeks later, that man disappeared.
Oh God.
It was gone, completely disappeared. The story was he went to work for Homeland Security, but who knows? It was really weird.
That's interesting. Yeah, I had a situation years ago where in Cincinnati, we have an FBI field office that isn't too far from where I live, and I had reached out to them and I said, hey, can I come in and see the inside of your building? And they're like, why? And I said, well, I'm an author, and I have a scene that is in an interrogation room inside the FBI. And I just want to know what an interrogation room looks like. And they're like, no, you can't. And I said, all right. So I made it up. And I sent it to, no, he said, I tell you what, he's like, we won't let you in, but you can send us the text that you're writing about that scene, and we'll let you know if you're close.
Oh, well,
and I said, okay,
good.
that's good. So I said, that's fine. So I sent it to him, and he wrote back and he said, after reading this scene, he's like, you cannot convince me that you have not been inside this building. And I just made it all up, even down to, like I said, well, they're probably handcuffed. So, I had a metal bar, bolted to the wall, went all the way around the perimeter of the room where they could, handcuff people to. And as far as I know, that's in there. I don't know. But so I got a kick out of that because, that was just kind of, I assumed, well, this is what, and you don't have to be accurate with that stuff, right? Because, you're never going to know what the inside of an FBI interrogation room looks like. But, you try and be as accurate as you can. And I always kind of got a kick out of that I was pretty close.
That's really interesting.
Can I
Anybody else?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
go
just
ahead.
wanted to ask about that the Killer Nashville conference. I saw that and was thinking about it, didn't go. Why did you end up going and what did you get out of it?
So the reason I went this year, and I had thought about it in the past, and I try to go to one or two conferences a year because they can be expensive, especially if you're staying in a hotel. It's easy to, or if you're flying, it's really easy to rack up a credit card bill. And I tend to stick to the ones that are in driving distance for that reason. But the reason that I went this year was Killer Nashville. I've always heard is they have a good mix of industry people there. They've got editors, they've got agents. And I knew I was to the point in my career where I wanted an agent. And because I want to chase some of those big publishing deals and the Hollywood stuff and all that. And I needed an agent to get into those conversations. And Killer Nashville was a really good balance of kind of this tradecraft panels and craft panels, but then also, the one-on-one interaction with agents that I thought was really, really good. And of all of the events I've been to in the past, this by far, I think, was the best from kind of that agent and industry standpoint. It was a great mix. And I haven't been to Thriller Fest. My guess is Thriller Fest in New York is probably, similar. They probably have a lot of agents there just because it's New York. But the access was incredible. You got to sit down and have dinner with these people and kind of have these one-on-one roundtables. And there were a lot of just discussions that were happening. One of the agents I had was hoping to meet with, I actually couldn't get on his calendar because he was booked. All of his roundtable spots had booked. And I was on a panel, the very last panel of the conference. It started on Thursday. This was a Sunday afternoon. And he sat down next to me on the panel. And I was like, I said, I've been trying to get on your panel and I couldn't because you were all booked up. And he's like, tell me about your book. And this was before the panel had started. People were just wandering in and I pitched him the book and he's like, send it to me when you're done. So just
Oh,
it's great,
man.
and that has never really happened to me at other industry events, but I highly recommend it. I think it's great. I think the only downside is the panels are so good, and they've probably got 5 happening concurrently. It can be
Oh.
difficult to pick the one that you want to go to. But yeah, I thought it was great.
Was this Killer Nashville?
Yes, and it takes place
I had
in
a lot of
September.
friends go to that, and I seem to be writing historical thrillers, so so I might go next year. I was looking into maybe going next year. I was in Shetland Noir with Anne Cleves this summer, and that was like the thrill of a lifetime to be with all these UK crime writers. Pretty amazing.
My first event, and sorry, Killer Nashville is August. I think I said September. It's like August 12th, right around there. My first event was a BoucherCon, which was huge, and it was so intimidating. I went to one in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm like, what in the world am I doing here?
It was
I got
just
to meet
San Diego.
which was a blast.
Yeah.
And that one moves around, I know, but
What was the one
Revis Wortham goes to all those. He'd be a good resource to ask too. Revis, he was my co-host for like 5
I
years.
love him.
Yeah.
We used to go to I think it's shuttered now, Magna Cum Murder, which was in Indianapolis every October, and we've been on panels together, we've done game shows together. He is an absolute trip.
He is. I miss him. He hasn't been in a couple of years. I'd love to he's got a true Western coming out, which I
that's
cannot
right.
wait to read. I can't wait to read it. So
When Joe Lansdale is down in your neck of the woods too.
I was on a panel with him at
He's
a
great.
film festival, and I'll tell you, it was really interesting. I was the only woman on any of the panels at the entire film festival, and I was ignored completely.
Oh no.
Yeah, completely ignored. It was really awkward. It was
Yeah,
really,
that's unfortunate.
because they thought, well, what is she doing here? Well, that's when I'd option my, film to DreamWorks, so they had me come in. But it was really but it's okay. Those things happen, you learn. But I don't think he's a bad guy. He actually has got a new book out that's, yeah, he's really kind of a cult favorite around here.
Yeah.
And, but he's great. Are you there? I lost you.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, this is the weirdest thing. Okay, I don't know where you went on my screen. Well, can you see me?
Yeah. I can see everybody.
Okay, well, I'm not gonna worry about it. I don't know where I went. Well, as long as it's recording and you're on it, I don't care. So, what would, if you were gonna share one thing about this, you've been writing now since 2014 or before that?
Yeah, I probably started in 2014, right around there.
Yeah, if there was some advice that you would send out to writers today, you know, it's a tough, I just shared today, they had this new, you know, they had done this new census or whatever, and they said 6% of everybody that said, 6% of all the people that say they're gonna write a book actually write one. And
Hmm.
of that 6%, of the ones that, you know, actually do write one, only 3% of them ever get published.
Yeah.
So it's a tough, I mean, it is really tough to get, you know, everything out there today. And so I'm trying to think of new ways to constantly help my authors and get people to come to our weekend and talk to the authors every week. And if you guys have any ideas, shoot them to me, because I'm constantly looking at new things, trying to figure out ways. But it's really it's in everything. It's in the writing, as screenwriters, as agents, as songwriters, as music people, as artists, you know. And this AI thing is getting scarier and scarier, Jeffrey. Did you see the post I put up from Jamie Ford today?
Yeah, terrifying.
His publisher got the database of the ebooks, somehow got it back. And he had 6 books on that database for AI that they were using his content,
Oh God.
all of his books. And now he said, you need to check it out and see if you're on it too, because it's just the scariest thing I've ever seen. So I don't know what to even think about it, but I'm scared of it. It's going to affect all of our livelihoods. So anyway, any advice you would like to give, or anything that's really kept you going and kept the faith that you would like to share with the
I
writing world?
think so. Yeah, I love to play craps, right? And I think that
Right.
craps is it can be a very intimidating game when you walk up and you look at
Yeah.
that table. However, it can also be a very simple game if you just focus on some fundamentals. And I
Huh.
think so many authors or budding authors that I've talked to, they seem to be so focused on, how do I find a publisher? How do I get an agent? How do I sell a screenplay?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you written
Yeah.
anything? I haven't written it yet. It's like, okay, well, let's start with that. You know, it can be very distracting.
Yeah.
A lot of things you can worry about. Worry about the story first and write a shitty first draft, because it's
Yeah.
easy to fix a crappy first draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very intimidating to get it done. But what's the old adage, right? Right with the door closed. Understand that your first story is going to be bad, but just do it anyway, because you can fix it. And I've always looked at, writing as I guess now it's kind of changed, but like the old eye exams, right? Where you sit there and they kind of flip the things, and each time they do something, it gets a little clearer and a little clearer. For me, that's how I look at the revision process. My first
Yeah.
drafts are horrible. They're supposed to be. They're horrible. But with every pass through, it gets a little clearer and a little clearer, and then eventually you've got something that's going to pass for a manuscript. So my advice is, to people has always been, don't make it any harder than it is, because it's hard enough already, and just focus on the story. Write a good story, because honestly, if you can write a good story, I don't think anything else really matters. You'll
It
find an
sells
audience.
itself.
You'll
Yeah.
get
It
views.
sells
Yeah.
itself. Yeah.
I mean, I can, what was, people people, had a lot of negative things to say about, the Da Vinci Code and 50 Shades of Grey. You'll always find people that are, bad mouthing other books, but there's a reason those books made those people a lot of money
Absolutely.
because they're good stories, you know. And so focus on that and don't worry about anything else and get a good story down and that should be all you need to worry about.
And don't compare yourself to anybody else. I mean,
Oh God,
your only competition is yourself,
yeah,
really.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
that's the way it should be, because I see the authors all the time helping each other. Or I get, like Karen Harrington said, Pat Conroy called me and said, I really like to help you. Could I blurb your book for you? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
It was her first book out, and he called her, he met her at Girlfriend Weekend, Catherine Casey, who writes all those Texas Rangers and true crime. She's helped me, I don't even know how many times, but lots of authors. Leila Meacham helped Boo Walker, who was living in Spain at the time. She thought he might need some help, and I just that makes me feel so good when I see other authors supporting other authors, and like all of you that have come here tonight to support Trace, because nobody wants to come on and have nobody show up. So if you support other people, they'll support you. It's just all about being a good person, but good for you.
Yeah.
I'm excited for you, and I think you're going places. I think every author I pick should be on the big screen. And I honestly, I think if they need material, they just need to come to our reading list, because it's all there, every genre. Because I don't pick, people go, oh, you just pick Southern novels. No, I don't. I pick novels from around the world. So I think your advice is just right on, great, and keep them coming to me. I want to read this next book. Be sure when it's ready that I get a copy. And for all of you that have new books, and I want to read it. It's so satisfying to me that I can pick a book and then it goes on to superstardom, like Jamie Ford, Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet. Nobody knew what that book was. Lisa Wingate took her 30 books to break that. 30 books before her book went to the million bestseller list. So don't give up, hang in there, work hard, support each other. And, reading's important. Read, read, read. So thank you for joining us tonight. Let you get you back to your family, and keep us posted. I'm going to be watching your blog tomorrow. For everybody that's not watching, that's watching here, this is going to be up on our Pulpwood Queen channel, and he blogs every day on the Pulpwood Queen Presents, which is my blog page on Facebook to showcase the author that we feature every week. And I pre-approve you now, so you can post as much as you want and get on there as much as you want. But you're through Sunday, so however much you want to do it. I used to say, you have to do this. I know how we have busy lives. Whatever you can do, I appreciate. And thank you, Trace. Thank you so much. And I thank
for
you
having
for
me.
sending me your books. They're great. So we'll be back next Tuesday night from the University of Texas here at the Robert M. Muntz Library. And I'm going to go home and do some homework, y'all. You all have a
Thanks,
great
Jen.
night.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye,
Trace.
everybody. It's
Thanks
all
very
about the
much.
story.
was
Thank you,
great.
Trace.
Good
Well,
night.
I'll get this up by tomorrow morning. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Bye-bye.